Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Dennis, Carroll, yes, once again, you make your way into the shadows known as the Fox Den to awaken me from my slumber for an episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Yes, this is going to be another educational video about the Dogman. Yet I have been sleeping for very long and need to attend to something. Much better. Absolutely delicious. And thank you, Dennis, for releasing me from my shackles and allowing me to revamp myself for this expedition of the Dogman. And remember, you can't spell slaughter without laughter. I am getting ready to take a walk into the darkness once again with Dennis Carroll.
Blow, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, bleeding born, fury rise, health ignites, burning rays, endless nights.
I looked into the eyes of this Dogman. There was nothing. This thing was an apex predator.
Milk road, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, beast reborn,
My creatures of the night, yes. Welcome back to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. This is the home and the stomping ground of the Midnight Society. Once again, we sit around the late night fire and burn the timber in an attempt to figure out what the heck is occurring across the country and the globe with missing people. How you doing tonight, Dennis?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. How are you?
Been busy, my friend, but just been plugging away. What's been new with you?
Well, I've been doing a lot of cases here lately and doing some very deep research into some of these Dogman sightings. I'm actually going to be doing for my Patreon, I'm going to be doing a video on Dogman home invasions. So that should be interesting. But I've been doing a lot of deeper research on some of the Dogman phenomena. And I think there are some definite, I believe without a doubt, demonic ties to some of this stuff. I believe some conjuring is going on.
Jeez, that's some creepy stuff right there. And would you like to touch base on that a little bit? Maybe dive into some of that stuff?
Sure. I believe that some of these actual reports of Dogman where they're seen, especially in graveyards and cemeteries, these things seem, when they are seen or reported, that they are very much like on a mission to do something, as almost as if someone has sent them there. And sometimes there are some cases, kind of rare, but there are some where the people communicate telepathically with some of these Dogman entities, which is not a good thing. Anything that ever touches your mind that way is sort of the ultimate invasion of privacy. It's not a good thing for that to happen because that is one of the hallmarks of the demonic. So I'm getting a lot of reports on that as well as some of this other stuff. And I have to wonder if maybe some dark black magic of some sort, witchcraft or whatever, may be included in some of this stuff.
That is some pretty gnarly stuff right there for sure, and extremely interesting. And sounds like you have a pretty good premises of, well, what's occurring with that. And would you like to also maybe educate the audience on some of your thoughts as to how that could be occurring?
Well, I think that there are certain entities in this world that open doorways. I call them spiritual doorways. Some people may call them vortexes, portals, whatever the name you want to give them. These doorways are opened on purpose. And I think there is a dark intention and purpose behind some of this stuff. And people are letting some types of things through these portals. May not necessarily only be dogmen and stuff like that, but it may be other creatures that are unknown. I have encountered on some of my boots on the ground research out in the forest, I have encountered an almost invisible like entity. I call it Cryptid X. I don't know what this thing is, but it has affected other people. I've heard reports of it being especially seen on a lot of the Indian reservations, or not seen actually because it's invisible, but there has some interaction with this thing. People have been attacked by it. People have been haunted by this thing. It's coming in their houses, not only meeting them in the forest and in wooded areas, but it's also being encountered on city and village streets. So it's very interesting. Whatever this is, I believe without a doubt that a lot of this stuff is connected with cattle mutilations, I'm getting a lot of reports of just wild animal mutilations. And I'm not talking about animal attacks on each other, like predator attacks. These are mutilations that are carried out. And some people are being found mutilated as well in this fashion. And you've also, of course, got the factor of missing people. And some of that may be also connected to this. If you open these dark doorways, anything can come through. Who knows what's out there in the darkness?
Wow. Definitely some pretty intriguing stuff for sure. And creepy nightmare fuel right there. And you're actually one of the first people that really, introduced me to some more of the occult stuff that could potentially be occurring, which would solidify more into the werewolf realm. And yeah, it's definitely interesting to see potentially with the negative energy and also the negative input and just the manifestations that could be occurring in areas throughout negativity and occult type activity is truly baffling. And did you hear that recently over 13,000 occult books were found in a secret SS bunker by the Czech Republic? And I mean, let's be real. If you have 13,000 books on the occult, there has to be a point in time that you're going to find some sort of information or something of value inside of those books. And I mean, we all know that the Dirty Stash and also the SS were involved in that type of activity. But at the same point in time, we also now know that they had a lot more than just some of the more known banned and cursed books. They had their hands on 13,000 of those books, and I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. If you have that many books on hand, you are definitely a serious student of something like that. Absolutely. And a lot of this stuff is forbidden knowledge, hidden for certain reasons. I've had a lot of people come to me over the years and say, Dr. Carroll, can you tell me about this? Can you tell me about that? How do you do this? How do you do that? And I said, no, I really don't want to share that knowledge with you. I know what it takes to do these things. I know what it takes, the price is for calling forth this darkness. And it's not something you definitely want to play with or mess with or pay that price for, because it is essentially giving up your own humanity when you do these things. Very much like the werewolf. And here's the interesting thing about the werewolf, which is a supernatural creature. It's the witch that turns into this beast, the supernatural beast that has enormous supernatural power to it. I would rather run into Dogman than a werewolf anytime. But the interesting thing about the werewolf, here's one point. Every time they change form, it gets harder and harder for them to go back to the human form. And eventually they end up giving themselves over completely to being the beast for good. They can never turn back to human. That is the price that they eventually pay for this darkness.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty gnarly right there for sure. And that would make sense if you're sitting there and doing something consistently, and that would fall into the lore for sure. And I definitely believe that, like the cynocephali, like I say, were, physical entities. As far as I know, Cestius and Herodotus and all that never spoke of the cynocephali, using any sort of magical powers or coming out of portals. They just lived in the caves and such and used weapons and things. So I mean, they were, yeah, that'd be pretty scary still. Some sort of dog-headed or canine-headed looking being that was wielding swords and axes and such. But like you said, I mean, obviously the occult and such, when you dive into that, it really brings up a whole different aspect of mystery and bizarreness, and something that, well, you can't really, as far as we know, technically unalive something that could be spirit based or demon based, but the cynocephaly could be unalived. So no, that is some really creepy stuff. And like you were saying, when you're dealing with 13,000 books, it's just a matter of time before you find some sort of information in it. And yeah, I just figured once I had heard about that, I was like, yeah, I definitely need to share that with Dennis for sure and see, his thoughts on that, because the Dirty Stash and Heinrich Himmler were super into the occult, and they definitely were in all these areas that were occult based, like Castle Hauska and like the Czech Republic as well. And they most likely are probably responsible for, if these negative entities and beings really are out there. I would say that the Dirty Stash and his squad of people probably had really a large part in releasing some of those into maybe our realm. What do you think about that?
There's that possibility, definitely. Whenever you play with this stuff, you open these spiritual doorways. You're playing with fire. And it is incredibly hard sometimes to close these areas. I've run into them. I've had to do that. I've had to try to close some of these areas up. But once you open these doorways, it's easier to open than it is to close. Put it that way, which is what happens a lot of times with this so-called Ouija board use. It's not the board itself; it's what you're doing. It's the intention behind it, and that's the way it goes with opening these portals. But when it comes to Himmler and all that, definitely Nazism was born deep in spiritualism. The belief of the real and all that definitely shaped Nazism without a doubt. And of course, was absolutely obsessed with anything having to do with the supernatural and the occult. He was big into that. And I think the regime was. We've even seen, and I've seen photos of it, of one of his secret castles in the mountains of Germany where a lot of the SS would meet. And in the basement, they had a definite pentagram on the floor. They had different signals painted on the walls. They were deep into the occult. And they wanted one thing that they were seeking, and that was dark power. And like I said earlier in our conversation, there is a darkness in all of us, but the darkness of this world wants to hook up with that darkness in us and exploit it. And it becomes almost like a drug, this darkness. It pulls you in. I've often said this before in many of my lectures and stuff, that this darkness is the most addictive thing in the universe. You've got to be very careful about it, because once it gets a hold on you, it connects with that inherent darkness in you. It will form that tie that is almost unbreakable. A lot of people cannot get out of this. It's like stepping in quicksand or a quagmire. The more you struggle, the deeper you go. And the were definitely deep into this stuff in many, many different ways. They were looking for all of the unknown, forbidden, and occultic power that they could find.
Keep some crow. Yeah, that's some straight up nightmare fuel again. And it all just really makes sense. And there's actually a case, Celi Nexus Rathis, during World War II, where you have that infantry unit of the Americans that came up to that I don't think it was by choice, but there was a village that had been overtaken by, the SS and the Dirty Stash, and they basically had a town hall there. And this town hall was in pretty much premier shape. From the shape of this, well, the soldiers were interested, and that's when they went inside and figured out that it was run and operated by, the SS and the Dirty Stash. But long story short is, yeah, there was flooding and all these areas that had potentially looked to be newly blocked off. And what they did is they called in specialized divers, three of them, go down and see what was going on. Two of them didn't come back. And the guy that did come back was prominent and very adamant that he had seen numerous rooms with occult symbols all over the place, which we just spoke about their interest and all that, so that would make sense. And that even though there was water everywhere and everything was submerged, that in all these rooms, some of the rooms had just dismembered body parts everywhere. And then in other rooms, people were strapped to chairs and just ripped open their torsos. And then in another room, there were what looked to be human bodies with wolf or dog heads and even like a goat head on the top of some of these people. And it looked like he couldn't tell if they were moving from the current of the water or if they were trying to get out of their restraints. And when he came back up, well, yeah, he was released from his duties, and you don't really ever hear from him again. And then we ended up handing over that village to the British, who then flattened it. But that's just like another example of the occult activity. And then recently they found someone else who was pretty high up in the SS. They found a bunker that he more or less lived in, and underneath it they found bodies that had been dismembered to an extent, or pieces were missing of different ages, and they think it had something to do with maybe human sacrifice as well. So yeah, it's pretty gnarly.
Yes, definitely. A lot of these dark rituals require certain human body parts to do the things they need to do to have these rituals work the way they want them to. And there have been many whispered reports over the years that some of our soldiers encountered whole villages that were villages of vampires, some that were supposedly werewolves. They ran into supposedly some of these hybrid creatures that were experiments and had encounters with some of them. You hear a lot of strange whispered reports from World War II. It's fascinating. I thought about doing a book on it once because there are so much sold about these things. A lot of these are rumors, of course, but you have to wonder. And there's one story definitely about the Black Forest of Germany that they said that the SS were told to take over the Black Forest and turn it into a hunting reserve for Heinrich Himmler. And he tried to do that, but supposedly the unit he sent in to do this was disseminated by the vampires of the Black Forest. They completely wiped out a whole unit of the German soldiers that was sent in there to do that. And so he immediately withdrew and hid what happened. They had very meticulous records, and supposedly the records were missing for a lot of this stuff. They were destroyed on purpose. But supposedly this group of vampires wiped out the SS in the Black Forest. A very interesting story.
Yeah, that is super gnarly again right there. And I mean, let's be real. We all know that this man, the Dirty Stash, and his people that were super loyal to him were straight up psychotic, horrible individuals. But let's also be real. When it came to military strategy and weaponry, I mean, they were probably the cream of the crop at the point in time. I mean, realistically, like what? It took more than half of the world to be able to stop a country the size of Texas, you know? So when you're talking about them fighting something crazy like, vampires and such, I mean, they had some pretty gnarly weaponry too. So, I mean, if they're just getting smoked, then obviously that must have been some pretty insane stuff they were dealing with. And also, too, there was a forest that one of the Dirty Stash's high up scientist was super intrigued with, that had like mysterious reports of animals in it, but also a ton of known animals that he really wanted to basically call his area. So once they took it from
whatever country that it belonged to, he went in and they ended up creating this bull that was extinct, but it was a massive bull that in theory should have applied a ton of use for them and everything, but it was so lazy that it was pretty much useless except for consumption because it stood there and did nothing and pretty much couldn't function at all without humans. But yeah, no, there's just another instance of them, kind of diving into strange things and being able to resurrect something that was extinct. I mean, it was recently extinct, but I mean, when was World War II? Like, were we talking about the 60s here that they did that? It's pretty advanced, if you ask me.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, I was just thinking while you were saying that there was a unit of the army that was called the Werewolves. By the way, that's how vicious these guys were. But I think if you look behind the human darkness of the regime, I think you see a darker, what I would call supernatural darkness behind it. Like you said, it's only the size of Texas. It's not that big, but yet it took most of the world to put it down. I think they had a distinct demonic power, like behind a lot of the things that they were doing, a lot of the thrust that was going on. And we know without a doubt that there were a lot of strange experiments taking place. They were experimenting on a lot of the Jewish population that they had in the camps. They were doing a lot of nefarious things. And they were very interested in hybridization. That was where I think a lot of the super soldier program began with them. They were looking to enhance their military, and the governments of the world to this day are still good at weaponizing things. When they see something, they say, how can we make this a weapon? That's the way they operate. And they would not stop. And I know this without a doubt because I have been approached by certain individuals in the United States that have led me to believe without a doubt that they are tapping supernatural talents and doing things with the supernatural that is still in some strange way carrying on a lot of the programs that they're involved with.
Yeah, I mean, it is some pretty creepy stuff, and that's why I think that when it comes to the occult and maybe some of the shadow figures and things such as darker entities, demons, and winged entities that look like the Jersey Devil, all these things. So there's definitely a tie to the occult. And I mean, we know that the Dirty Stash is pretty much the prime person. I mean, there might be somebody else out there, but dude, 13,000 books, man, that was just in one of the dang bunkers. How many other bunkers have not been discovered yet with stuff like that in there? So, I mean, I'm willing to be pretty optimistic to say they probably had the largest occult collection of all time. I mean, so they definitely must be some sort of responsible for what's occurring. But with the cynocephaly, for example, I mean, 290 BC, that was way before any of that type of interaction or really the occult activity. I mean, sure, there was obviously some of that stuff occurring, but really seems that the cynocephali just lived in the caves and were more or less like hominoid type like entities, or that would be quadrupedal, bipedal, using swords, weapons, and things. But they lived in the mountains. I mean, they came down from the mountains. They traded. If it, I guess, was supernatural based, I don't see how they could have unalived it with their swords or have them unaliving people beside them. I also don't see why they would be consuming the fallen soldiers on the field of battle, even though they normally wouldn't have done that. And also, if it was paranormal, why the heck would they walk all the way down from the mountains to come trade with you? Why would they not just hop through a portal or something and appear in your village? You know what I mean? If they had that capability, why would they walk all the way down through the mountains like the country of India and their civilization speak about it? You have people in Iraq speaking about it. I definitely feel like they are pretty physical right there. And that, in my opinion, really kind of is one and the same with the Dogman. But then obviously I'm guilty of using the terms interjectably werewolf, Dogman. But it's one and the same, but it's not. Meaning, yes, someone could be seeing a werewolf but think they're seeing a cynocephaly or vice versa. And yeah, so that's why it's connected. But at the same time, someone could also be seeing a cave hyena or a dire wolf and thinking unknown canine creature, dogman. And again, that's why that's connected. But there's all definitely differences, and meaning you got your potential paranormal, extraterrestrial, or physical, and extraterrestrial doesn't have to mean from outer space. It could be, I don't know much about this, but just someone brought it up, like inner Earth theory, meaning, I mean, these cynocephali did come from caves and dwell in caves as well. So who knows? I mean, they could maybe be extraterrestrial, meaning here before we even did exist or evolve as a civilization, and they have used the caves and such for quite a long time. And a lot of people just, I think, assume that extraterrestrial has to come from outer space, but I mean, technically, it could come from caves or even within the ocean. Extraterrestrial just means more or less unexplored and unfamiliar to us.
It's an interesting possibility that a lot of these things may be interterrestrial instead of extraterrestrial. In other words, they may be coming from civilizations that are underneath us. That is the number one vast unexplored area on this planet, is the underground under us. There could be anything down there. There could be civilizations. That could be where Atlantis eventually went to. There is a lot of what I call red flags in folklore that point to the underground. There's a distinct connection with a lot of that. And we were talking the other day about these pale crawlers that people see. I believe without a doubt there's some type of subterranean creatures that come out once in a while out of the cave systems and tunnels. These pale crawlers are a fascinating study, but I think there's something going on definitely in the underground underneath us. And there have been many stories, and I'm talking going back centuries, of underground civilizations on this planet.
Yeah, that's some pretty gnarly stuff right there for sure. And it's just some more food for thought and just something else for people to really kind of pick their own brains about and be like, wow, that's interesting. And as we're coming a little bit towards the end here, what else do you have for opinions about all of that? I mean, do you think that it would most likely be majority responsibility based of, say, like the Nazis? I mean, obviously you have skinwalkers and such, like the Navajo and things that speak about negative energies and putting out, manifesting things. So, I mean, obviously there's other potential beings, such as the Nordics and, people in the past that could have put out that negative energy as well. But 13,000 books, man, I don't know, dude. It really seems to me like if we're going to be pointing some fingers on people or groups of individuals that could be responsible for this, man, we got to be like hard looking at the SS, man. I mean, look at the other screwed up stuff they did.
Well, this is an interesting thing about black magic, or the dark arts, as some people call it. It is a shortcut to doing some things you might want to be doing. It would be a shortcut through science. Science would be the long way around, you might say, to get to certain aspects of changing physiology of people or whatever. You would take the shortcut, and that would be black magic or the dark arts. I think that they were going in that direction because that was what they were looking for. And I think that without a doubt, in many ways, they tapped into that dark power of reserve, that reserve of power that's waiting, that demonic power. I think without a doubt, these people knew how to harness that and then turn it to use it in a more scientific, technological way as well. I've often said this about that. That type of technology is what I like to call shadow science. It is taking the shortcut by using the black arts and dark witchcraft or black magic, whatever name you want to call it. It's taking the shortcut to go about the technology that you want. Because, and here's an interesting thing to think about, the demonic would love to give us their technology, and I believe they do have a technology of their own. I think from time to time they give us little snippets of it so that we will probably, hopefully, seal our own doom with it. They're not giving it this technology or helping us to find this technology for any good reason. It all has a very bad reason, a bad intention that goes with it. We have to understand that's what true shadow science is all about. Alchemical science, just like alchemy from the medieval times. It's going about doing things and things, changing the perception, reality of things the wrong way. And the Nazis were very good at that, definitely without a doubt. They were very interested in that, and I think they did a lot of it. And here's one more thought on that. The rocket scientist who took us to the moon was a former SS officer. The other one, the other second rocket scientist that helped us get to the moon, was a disciple, Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, exactly, man. I mean, and then he's like another one too, dude. So that is just so interesting and so bizarre, man. Like 100%. It's absolutely just so gnarly that there's so much of that stuff out there, dude. So I always do appreciate individuals such as yourself that specialize in that topic being able to bring some clarity to it, man, because I definitely, really kind of try to dive more into the physical stuff and working with my science team, etc. But at the same time, I definitely don't know much about like the occult and some of the other dark stuff, such as yourself, which is why it's super important that we have people like you on our science team that can figure this stuff out. So it's definitely amazing, man. And before I let you get back to some of the busy stuff you need to be doing, is there anything else you'd like to touch base on?
Now, it pretty well covers it tonight. There's one thing we got to remember. We have to go back to the origin of things and see what their true beginning is. Whether it's hidden, secret from us, or whatever the situation, it will tell us the true story of of the knowledge that we're trying to seek. Always look for the origin and the beginning of things. That will tell you a lot of what it's founded upon.
Isn't that the truth, my friend? Isn't that the truth? Well, thank you again for everyone that stopped in tonight. This is how we will be concluding the Midnight Society's gathering. And I do hope everyone learned something tonight because it is really important to nerd out with people that have a ton of knowledge for you to be able to gather and learn about. And yes, all my hosts definitely teach me a ton because if I had a choice of, I mean, I love to pass on information, but if I had a choice of learning or speaking myself, I'd much rather learn and be updated with information because I'm a geeker, like I said, and learning is something that's super imperative. So I do always appreciate people such as yourself allotting time out of your busy schedule to come in with really great topics, trying to figure out what the heck is going on, man.
Anytime, my friend. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, definitely. Well, to my audience out there, we do need to let Dennis get going, and I do hope everyone stays safe out there. Make sure to keep your head on a swivel for sure. And we will have Dennis on here again in a few weeks because we're going to try to get him on bi-weekly, especially now that he's all back and ready to rumble with his internet and power. And hopefully everything's going good. So we will see him very soon for sure.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by tonight for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. If you do enjoy my content, please like, comment, subscribe, share it, and indulge. I will make sure to keep on feeding out the information